Afternoon all. On behalf of the Energy Cork cluster, I'd like to welcome you all to our first briefing of 2022. Thanks very much for joining us. Today we're delighted to welcome two speakers to this event, Andy Fox of SEAI and Alice Darcy of STEAM Education Limited. Andy is going to detail a topic that is of greatly increasing importance to industry and communities alike in Ireland. That's the RESS community benefit funds that are formalising and directing the funding and management of community benefit funds associated with renewable electricity projects that are being supported by the government's Renewable Electricity Support Scheme. This will be a major source of community funding in the coming years, and it's important that both industry and communities understand how it operates. Alice is going to outline the vision of STEAM education, inspiring children to love STEAM subjects and to become the future generations of scientists, technologists, engineers, artists, and mathematicians. As we'll see, STEAM education do this by providing innovative, fun, hands-on educational programs in these subject areas, which are delivered in primary schools to 4th, 5th, 6th class, using real-life STEAM experts from industry and academia work with the primary school teacher, and with specially designed tools and content to deliver the program and to inspire the kids. A number of energy companies already sponsor the work of STEAM education in schools in their communities. It's an excellent practical way of supporting STEAM and sustainability amongst our young people. We'll aim to finish in time at 1:45 and hopefully have time for a Q&A at the end. Do let us have your questions via the chat function. So if a question pops to mind at any stage during the presentation, I'd say just pop it into the chat function. Importantly, Energy Cork hosted events would not be possible without the ongoing presentations, support of Cork County Council and Cork City Council through their respective economic development funds. A couple of items of housekeeping. It should be already done so by default, but please keep your microphones on mute for the duration of the event. As I mentioned, we'll have a short Q&A session following the presentation. Please use the chat function to ask any questions you might have. This event is being recorded and will be shared online afterwards. And so I'd like to introduce, firstly, Andy Fox, Community RESS Program Manager, SEAI. Andy is the Community RESS Program Manager for SEAI, focusing on supporting an enabling environment for communities to become involved in small-scale renewable energy projects. Andy is also responsible for developing the online Community Benefit Fund Register that will register and report on all funds coming from RESS projects. Andy's background is originally in community development, and more recently in community engagement for renewable energy projects in Ireland. Alice Darcy is Managing Director of STEAM Education Limited. Alice, since 2015, she has channeled a broad range of professional experience from ecology to animation, development education to sustainability management into the development of STEAM approaches to learning and teaching. A strong advocate of lifelong learning, she has a variety of qualifications from applied ecology, applied environmental science, a PhD, a creative and change, arts participation and development, creative and digital marketing, and art therapy for socio-educational interventions. For sure, Alice, we can see your appetite for education there. Without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Andy.
Thanks, Harry. No need to introduce myself there. You've done a great job, thanks. I'll just see, can we get sharing the slide deck? There we go. Great. Okay. Thanks very much for joining us today. It's great to have so many of you out there. I'm going to just take you through in the next kind of 15 minutes an overview of the RESS Community Benefit Fund element. I'll chat through a little bit around communities and renewables, some of the basic principles of RESS community benefit funds. Wherever you see CBFs, that's the abbreviation for community benefit funds. A little bit on the good practice principles handbook that's been put together, the online portal that we're developing, and SEAI's support function to these benefit funds. So I suppose, first of all, in terms of communities and renewables, the Renewable Electricity Support Scheme, RESS, you'll hear it referred to a lot of the time, is the new government scheme to support the development of renewable energy projects in Ireland. It's one of a number of different strings in Ireland's bow in terms of trying to meet the target of 80% renewable electricity by 2030. It's based on an auction system where renewable energy generators compete against each other for contracts by bidding in a price for the power that they can produce. So it's a new development in terms of the way that this is done in Ireland, and it should help to deliver lower costs. There are, I should point out, two distinct auctions, one for the commercial scale of projects and another one for community projects. So projects between 0.5 and 5 megawatt run by community groups compete in their own pot. From RESS 2 onwards, those have to be 100% community owned. There are a number of community aspects built into RESS, aiming to try and increase the participation of communities within the energy transition in Ireland. And that's also kind of recognised within the more recent policy and legislation. So the basic principles of the RESS community benefit funds: firstly, all projects that secure a RESS contract must pay into a community benefit fund. And this is, again, kind of unique to Ireland in a way, in that it's a mandatory fund. You'll find in many other countries around Europe, this is an optional, it's not a requirement. So all projects, again, that get a RESS contract must register on the SEAI benefit fund portal, which I'll talk a bit about a little bit later on. It is based, the benefit funds, or the fund calculation, is based on production of electricity at a rate of €2 a megawatt hour. And again, that's set and standard across the board. There is a huge kind of shift in a lot of the language that's used, both in policy and in the terms and conditions for RESS, that drive the importance of community participation in the decision making around community benefit fund strategy at a local level. And I think this is where there's probably an awful lot of work that needs to be done, especially from a community point of view, in gearing up for that. Its focus is on providing local funding for non-profit making community entities. And within it, there is a ring-fenced portion in each fund of 40% of the funds that need to go towards projects that support the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular, Goals 4 around quality education, Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, Goal 11, which is around sustainable cities and communities, and Goal 13, climate action. So just kind of graphically to look at that in a little bit more detail, for each individual community benefit fund, there are some stipulations within the conditions for these. The first is around near neighbour payments. Now, those are specific to onshore wind only, but they have a kind of minimum payment requirement for any residences that are within a kilometre of a wind farm. They've put a maximum cap of 10% for administration costs. Then you've got your 40% for sustainable development goal initiatives, and the remaining balance is then for probably your more traditional local clubs and societies. And there's an allowance within that last piece for near neighbour payments from 1 to 2 kilometres as well. So to look at RESS 1 as an example, there are currently now 64 successful projects in RESS 1, which would equate to, based on their projected energy production, €4 million a year in community benefit funding from RESS 1 projects. And again, out of those 64 projects, 7 of those were community projects. And I suppose the guiding principle, or the guiding documentation for managing those funds would be the RESS terms and conditions specific to each RESS auction, and the good practice principles handbook. So yeah, the handbook was developed by DEC with support from SEAI, and sets out some guidelines and recommendations on what is considered good practice in setting up and administering benefit funds. It covers areas such as the roles and responsibilities of key stakeholders. So those would be the developer themselves, the administrator that's appointed, and the local community benefit fund committees that would be constituted to manage those funds. Setting up and operating a fund, some of the key fund parameters, and also reporting on those funds. I mentioned the online portal. So this is an area, again, mandated within the terms and conditions, and it's something that I'm looking after. So there are three main areas of this portal that we're looking at. There's, first of all, a journey for each energy generator, where they will register each of the projects that receive a RESS contract. And then on an annual basis, they would report on their generation of their project and the funds that are to be transferred from the project to a community benefit fund. There's a second journey in that portal for the community benefit funds themselves. So they would register as a separate entity. We then link them to the generation project that is funding that benefit fund. We'd look at funding cycles, which may not necessarily follow annual cycles, depending on the scale. You know, some projects will be much smaller scale and might choose to roll their funds over for a couple of years, build them up a bit, and launch them once every 3 years instead of annually or whatever. So we'll track those funding cycles, and then have a reporting element on each of those. And then the third part of this is a more public-facing web page that would look at trying to digest all the data that we get in from the registration reporting elements, capture that on various maps, and also present a lot of that data for public consumption, academic consumption. There's various stakeholders who'd be interested in understanding how those funds are being used. In terms of SEAI's support function, then we and our team would be available for assistance and guidance to all the fund stakeholders throughout the lifetime of the benefit funds. We've been mandated by DEC to perform a kind of monitoring and compliance function for all benefit funds under RESS, to provide guidance and support in setting up and implementing fund strategies, and kind of contributing towards the community action plans that help to drive the strategies for those benefit funds. We would have a role in any resolution of disputes within benefit fund committees, facilitate and capacity building with communities across our SEC network. And also, I mean, separately to the actual benefit fund element of this, we are putting together what's called the community enabling framework, which is targeted at those community projects that are going to enter as generation projects into RESS. So again, we're looking at a grant and advisory service that would support community projects to take part in that. So, I mean, overall, I suppose it's an enormous opportunity for communities. The benefit funds will represent the largest transfer of wealth in the state to communities over their lifetime, and these are, you know, quantifiable funds being made available on an annual basis for communities. There are a number of auctions planned out to 2025 currently, but based on the onshore RESS auctions, you're looking at a quantum of, you know, €750 million in funding going into communities over the lifetime of those projects. So it's a significant value, and that doesn't take into account offshore. So ORES, offshore RES, when it comes into being and the auctions start going out, I mean, the quantum is a multiple of 10 based on those, so significant investment. I think the importance is being able to translate that into action on the ground. So again, the support that communities are going to need in terms of being able to interact with this appropriately and strategically in order to bring those positive impacts down to a local level across, you know, environmental, societal, and cultural areas of local community life. There is a hope that it also will foster a kind of more collaborative working relationship between developers and communities, especially in looking at how you maximize those values of those funds. And again, I suppose the underpinning key point here is ensuring that there's community engagement and participation in the decision making around how these funds are used, so that local communities are driving strategies at a local level as to how to put these funds into best use. That's me.
Super. Thanks very much, Andy. And I didn't even need to ring the bell for timekeeping, which is always a plus. Okay, over to you. So Alice, if you're ready to go ahead.
Yeah, great, thanks. I'll just share my slides there now, 1 second. Can everybody see that? Yeah. So hi everyone, I'm Alice Darcy. Thanks to Kieran and Harry for inviting me to speak, and thanks Andy for the first set of information. I'm really happy to see the direction of funding towards really supporting community involvement and collaboration, as partnerships is something we've been doing for a while, and I think it's really positive. So I will crack on. So STEAM stands for Science, Tech, Engineering, Arts and Maths. We've been running for about 9 years now. I'm the managing director. There's 2 of my colleagues on this call, Linda Egan, who's our main client engagement and sales person for the Cork area, primarily for engineering and climate action programs, and David Nolan, who's our business development exec. So we're a Cork-based multidisciplinary team. We work with industry and academia all over the country to support and enhance primary education. The mission is to inspire kids, support creative and critical thinking skills, support them to develop their full potential in association with STEM industry. We started about 9 years ago, kind of around a table, as many of these things do, and then we moved into the Gateway incubation space in UCC, and then we just recently moved down to the Marina Commercial Park. We kind of outgrew the space. So you'll probably, there's some familiar faces in the audience there, so I know some of you already. To give you a little bit of overall context, we do this from an all-island approach. The map on the right there is every primary school in the country. Well, the Northern Ireland schools aren't on this map, but if altogether there's over 4,000. So we develop and deliver curriculum-linked deep interventions to support schools in future careers. So far, we've reached about 16,000 children, over 150 primary schools, over 50 companies, councils and other supporters, over 150 teachers and STEM professionals, and that's all by the end of this school year. And so that's our kind of current spread in science, engineering, climate action and maths programs. Today, of course, I will focus on the Cork element of it. So zooming in there on the primary schools of the Cork area, there's about 366 in total. We currently support 40 or so, varies year on year. So only 320 more to go. So I need quite a few companies to manage that. Our current Cork supporters are shown on the slide here. So thank you so much to everyone who is already working with us and working with schools. Plenty of room for more, of course. Not all energy companies. We work with all kinds of engineering, STEM, pharma, biomedical, anyone in those supply chains as well. Basically anyone with scientists, engineers, technologists, people who will give us their volunteers to work with schools and really understand that supporting children early development of these skills will lead to a better STEM sector in the future. So we've a lot of engineering companies supporting engineering programs in Cork. And then in the last couple of years, we developed a climate action program in association with the Clare Education Centre and some schools in Clare, kind of mid-lockdown, which was challenging, but worked really well. And now we are rolling that out with companies. So with DP along the Cork coast, Codling up around Arklow. We are also working with Wind Energy Ireland, the ERI and UCC, Enerpower and Green Rebel. So what I'm going to talk about now is why you would engage with us and how it works. So essentially, we're looking for more companies to join the STEAM community and support local primary schools. Why? Well, STEAM is a more holistic approach to education. So we engage creativity in all subjects, develop critical thinking skills, developing connections both cross-curricular and with other sectors. They're all designed to be participatory, collaborative, really hands-on learning is the only way to work effectively with children, and often with adults too, actually. We make all the programs relevant so that the target age group, which is like 9 to 12-year-olds, are really engaged, and it has to be fun. So why primary school is a question we often get asked. Like, people do a lot of stuff with secondary. Well, neurologically speaking, this is a really key age group for the development of your brain. Your brain neurons are developing, firing. It's a really good time to introduce pathways, new people. Diversity is really critical, and to essentially start kids off with a positive mindset towards STEM careers and STEAM careers. One of the big challenges that we face, I guess, is that we're building on a kind of a rocky foundation. So primary education is critical, but primary schools are under-resourced to teach STEM. Teachers lack confidence and training in these subjects. Many interventions come too late. Science is still allocated only 1 hour a week in the primary school year, and that is not always even met. So when you really think about that, it's just not enough. Also, many well-intentioned interventions don't really support the school system. So we really make an effort to work on both sides. Most recent SFI report showed we're still at about 50-50 in terms of people thinking that school put them off getting into these kind of subjects, and the government aren't doing enough. So again, we've made a lot of progress, but still lots to do. And if you don't want to take my word for it, you can take the word of Professor Luke O'Neill. So we had a Zoom chat with him when he visited some of our schools. I won't play it now because it's probably too long, but you can watch it when Kieran circulates later. And essentially why we teach science really is not just about science, of course. It's about democracy. It's about understanding complex issues such as vaccinations and obviously climate action and climate change. So again, as you all know, we're in the midst of a biodiversity crisis, a climate crisis, energy transition, and education has to be part of the solution. So we obviously align ourselves with the Sustainable Development Goals, quality education, gender equality in terms of increasing girls in STEM, supporting the development of industry, innovation and infrastructure. Our programs on engineering and climate action include energy, and so obviously support affordable and clean energy, and then a climate action in its totality, I suppose. And then partnerships are key. So on the kind of more industry side of it, an OECD report a few years ago looking at how early children's perceptions are formed about industry, and there's a quote from it that says that children's career aspirations are most influenced by those they know. Worryingly, less than 1% of children have heard about jobs through people from the world of work coming to their school. Now, they're global figures. I'd say that we are above average in this respect, but it is a really powerful way to engage with the kids. So how it works. Essentially, if a company wants to work with us, you choose a program that matches your sector, your employee skills, and your company CSR goals. So for energy companies, I would suggest it would mainly be engineering in a box or climate action in a box, both of which have a focus on renewable energy. You can choose to gift it, teach it, or blitz it. So gift it, essentially you pick a school, We do everything else. We provide the course, we send the box to the school, we do the teacher training, we do all those parts. Teach it, you can give us your volunteers and we will train them to do it with us and with the teachers. And Blitz It is a combination of teaching it and then some additional PR packages, because obviously communication of what we're doing is really important. A lot of people surprise me, I suppose, by thinking that these educational interventions are free. They are not, much like any other business. Quality education, I guess, really requires time. Time, I guess, is the main cost. But essentially, you can start from a gifted to a school from a €750 per class up to about 2,000 for a 10-week program. The programs are either 5 lessons or 10 lessons, usually 1 hour a week for 5 or 10 weeks. And then scaling up or down depending on how many schools you have. So we help you then to get volunteers from your companies. Kind of the criteria for the volunteers, I guess, is we like scientists and engineers. It's not about qualification levels. It's more about if you're going into a school and you don't know more than the teacher about the field, then you're not really the person to do it. So essentially we want the scientists and engineers with the real stories from real life working experiences, because the children really respond well to that. So we support you to find volunteers, train them, provide the boxes of kit, the lesson content and plans, connect the schools, organize consent, GDPR, vetting, and do PR as well. So everything is hands-on. So the main point of each lesson is developed through an activity. So for example, in the energy one, of course, they get to make their own little wind turbines, and then they can expand them to be offshore or onshore, to be multifunctional with solar panels. So we really, the theory behind it is really, really nailed down through hands-on fun activities and a lot of discussion. So if you have a real life scientist or engineer that works on these projects in the classroom, it's really effective. And what's the benefit to your company? Well, there are many. Everyone has corporate social responsibility goals that they're trying to achieve. The early intervention enhances the industry's future. We have industry education links are really good. Like there's loads of companies around the country and the people in the neighboring communities don't really know what happens in there. There's a bit of fear, there's a bit of kind of isolation going on. Once you either bring the kids into the sites or the people from the sites go into the schools, you really break down the barriers and open everything up. You can also use it as continuing professional development for your own staff. So we'd have a lot of companies that give us different people every year. Maybe the graduate entry people. It's really great experience. Obviously, if you can go into a class of 30 children and teach them something useful, that's a great start for communication, confidence, all of those things. Also, I think it really crystallizes what you think you know yourself about the subject, because if you need to explain it in a way that a 10-year-old will understand, you really need to be clear. PR, of course, then the positive message that we send out. It's really a lot of fun as well. A lot of the volunteers, it ends up being like their favorite day of the week. And then, of course, the sustainable development goals, that's the other aspect. So I've talked about those already. So just on, I suppose, the media side of it, I've just put up a few examples of the posts and imagery we do on all the different platforms. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So we actively get involved in sharing those like positive stories from all the different schools around the place and from the companies. We could also do things like profiles of your company volunteers, do like sector magazines, stuff like that. You can get digital badges for the employees and for the teachers as inspirational co-teachers. Local press really always like the stories. So there's lots of options in terms of the PR. And then we do things like the children get certificates at the end, certificates of completion. So we can do co-branded certificates and posters for the schools and the companies. And oh yeah, we have programs Os Gaeilge as well, so to support the Irish language schools and generally the Irish language development. Pre-COVID, a lot of companies would have done, as well as going to the school to teach the program, they would then bring the kids to their site or to a site at the end. There'd be a certificate ceremony. And again, it's a really great sense of achievement for the children, also demystifies what goes on. When you talk to a real life engineer about their real life job, it makes it a lot more relevant to you and your choices going on to secondary school and all of those things. So really positive development overall. So I think I flew through that, but thanks for listening, and thanks to everyone supporting the Cork schools so far this year. We'd love to work with all of the Energy Cork companies to support every school in Cork if we could. We're ambitious, if nothing else. And if you want to contact myself or Linda to see about this coming school year, we've still got a bit of time to fit some more companies and programs in, but we're also trying to just make a longer timeline so that people are ready for September. It's been a very challenging year for schools, but as I say, there's still a couple of terms left and 5-week programs we can fit more in. So yeah, we would really love to work with more of you in Cork primary schools in the future. Thank you.
Super, great presentation. Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. Andy, to you also. Folks, just a reminder to all of you, there are some questions coming in the chat box. If you have any questions at all, do pop them in. I'll throw one out for a start, maybe to you, Andy, and possibly then to you, Alice. It's one that kind of straddles both sides of the coin as you're discussing there. Myself as a professional in the industry for about 20 years, you know, I'm struck by, you know, when it comes to wind projects and infrastructural projects that we need to put forward and really enable the energy transition. There seems to be more and more, you know, community-based opposition if you're looking at things like, you know, local wind farms and things like that. So, you know, that social license, we've done very well with the level of wind we've managed to integrate into our electricity system. But maybe, Andy, for you, it's great to see the community benefit scheme, but do we have a job of work on from a government point of view, communicating better, more effectively, policy, SEAI obviously as a key kind of stakeholder within that. But I mean, you know, the starting point, I guess, is letting communities know that these benefits are there, that they're coming, and all of the good stuff that will come with that. How can we do better, Andy, I suppose, for a start?
I mean, in some ways, actually, Alice's presentation kind of hits a lot of that on the head. You know, there is a huge role, I think, for far more flow of information towards communities and letting communities be far more involved in that process of policy, driving policy. But it is, I suppose we've kind of parachuted in, especially onshore wind and renewable energy and the energy transition into situations that aren't necessarily ready for it, and there's a huge amount of on the ground work which probably focuses more on the community development aspects of things. It is going back to communities and local community development and looking at priorities for, you know, where we're at now post, let's call it post-COVID, and into a world where, yes, we know we need to do certain things and we see climate change happening in front of our eyes, but a lot of the groundwork is still not done for people to be able to make informed decisions and to be able to look at things a little bit more strategically in their own, you know, in your own backyard. When you see something impacting you, you need to be far more aware and included in some of those discussions. So education, I think, coupled with a real leadership at a government level is crucial.
Yeah, I mean, I'm struck by, you know, the ramping up of communications during the COVID emergency, obviously, which had to happen because it was being treated as an emergency, rightly so. But again, I don't think anyone would disagree with the statement that we're not treating the climate emergency like it is an emergency. So definitely a job of work to be done there on that front. But Alice, maybe I guess a big benefit I see from what you do, you're informing those most exposed to the risks coming from climate change. You're arming them with the education, and I guess they go home and inform, educate their own parents, their own families, and you know, those are the people that need to be brought along a lot more readily than the kids, I guess. But I guess that's a key part of what you're aiming to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. So I suppose if you look at a parallel with the science education and vaccinations, it takes quite a while. But like a few years ago, we did a health science pilot program in a school in Dublin, and did like a mock-up of a vaccination and herd immunity. And one little girl in the class was crying because she was the one not being vaccinated in our fake trial. She so understood, following our education program, the point of herd immunity and the point of vaccination. Cut to like a couple of weeks ago, and a 40-year-old person asked me, did I believe in it? Did I believe in COVID? So, you know, we really need to get in early to bring that critical thinking and reason into people, as well, because there's such exposure now to misinformation, media. People get their information in different ways. If we don't create a solid foundation with clear curriculum linked, supported education involving teachers, there's just going to be more and more obstacles to the actions that need to be taken.
Yeah, and maybe just a continuation on that, because it's something I see every day in our own business here, that issue of resourcing. The whole energy, climate action, sustainability space now is it's what we would call a hot sector. There's investment pouring in. There's huge, you know, opportunities there, projects to be delivered. But we're seeing already, you know, and it's only 2022 on our journey to 2030, 2050 net zero. There aren't anywhere near enough engineers to resource the projects that need to be delivered. And we see that every day. So, you know, I'm a bit shocked by the 1 hour a week of science in primary school. What, you know, if you had the Minister for Education and the Taoiseach sitting in front of you, what would you be saying?
Oh, well, there's a review underway of the primary curriculum to address some of that imbalance. However, I would say that the curriculum really isn't the only or the key issue, because the teachers are not supported or trained in the subjects enough to teach it. So I think the collaborative approach, like we have an amazing STEM sector in Ireland. We have lots and lots and lots of highly qualified and experienced scientists, engineers, etc. I suppose what we're trying to do is create a framework that works around the country that is attached to what the teachers need to do themselves, and also providing opportunities for further teacher training, for spreading out the message. So if I had the minister, I would say that, well, I would personally like to restructure the whole primary system. I think it's very unfair of us to expect one human to spend 6 or 8 hours a day with 30 other people's children and not only take care of them, but actually teach them useful information, life skills, all of those things. So I think there really should be an addition of some STEM personnel to every school in the country. They haven't gotten, a lot of them still have terrible internet. They have poor, like really old laptops. If I tried to do this presentation in a school, I'd be hit by a number of hurdles, possibly bad internet, no YouTube, really, really old laptops, no tech support. You know, there's a whole heap of issues. Now, primary schools are doing their level best and they're doing an amazing job. We've got a very high level of primary education in this country, where it's not luck, it's policy. But I think we could make a significant jump to a much better system if we all got in together and bring the different perspectives. So yeah, there's a lot we could do.
Okay, thanks for that. Andy, look, before I jump to the questions coming in the chat, maybe one more for you in terms of, you know, the Community Benefit Fund. if you are a community close by to a planned wind development, I mean, what's the process for you to start to understand how you can benefit from these kinds of developments in your community? Obviously, there's stakeholder engagement process with the developer directly, but what are SEAI doing? You know, you mentioned the online portal. Is the best route through things like sustainable energy communities and getting the word out there, or how do the communities get visibility of the benefits that will come, and how do you access them?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose firstly, there is a requirement on a developer once a fund is up and launched to publicize that, and that, so, you know, in local media and through kind of multiple channels. So I think that's where people will first hear about those funds coming online, and one of the difficult things is often the time lag. So from a project going into a planning application, which is where you hear about it, to it actually being built and then generating electricity and then paying out into benefit funds, there are a number of years in that, and so you know, that's difficult for people. But then I suppose the go-to place would be the online benefit fund portal, and the idea of that would be, you know, again, being able to go on and from a mapping point of view, be able to see what funds are live or coming down the line around your local area, linked to what projects, and then be able to start seeing you know, links to how to go in and apply for those, etc.
Yeah, I mean, look, the point you make about the time lag thing is a really important one for sure, because that's when the opposition is mobilized in the community rather than when the project is up and running. So again, I guess the communication of what is coming is going to be critical. I have a question here from Kevin O'Sullivan of the Irish Times. Great to have you online, Kevin. So will renewable electricity projects, this is for you, Andy, sorry, will renewable electricity projects from individual schools and sports clubs be catered for under the microgeneration scheme, or can they benefit from community funding under RESS?
So the answer is probably both, as in, I would say there, you know, during the design stages of those projects, I think RESS, if they are in the localities of other, you know, of RESS projects and therefore the benefit funds, then they could definitely benefit from those benefit funds in terms of designing their projects, getting them into planning and all the rest of it if they need to. And then the microgen scheme will take them on once they're in operation, I would say.
Okay, thanks for that. So one for you again, Andy, from Ross O'Connell. Now, not sure if you'll be able to answer it, but you might try. So when will the offshore RESS be in place, and will it accommodate wave and tidal energy projects as well as offshore wind?
I'll try. I'm not on the offshore RESS team. My understanding is that the first offshore RESS auction will take place next year, is the plan. Now, again, timeframes for those projects are much longer. There's a lot more kind of in that space, but in terms of the types of technology that they will take on, I'm not sure. Again, those auctions will be sequenced over a number of years, and it may well be that as technologies come online and you know, become more competitive, they may come into future auctions, but I'm not entirely sure of the breadth of offshore RESS technologies.
Thanks for that, Andy. One from Evan Boyle here. Thanks, Alice. Andy, a quick one for you again, Andy. Is there an evaluation strategy in place in SEAI around the implementation of the community benefit funds moving forward? And is there any collaboration with research in this space?
Yeah, thanks, Evan. There is an evaluation in place based on the community aspects of RESS. So the elements of RESS that are community facing will have an evaluation, and there's a team in SEAI who are already involved in getting that ready. I know they're starting a kind of baseline survey for that now. So yeah, if you want to be linked into that, give me a shout. I can put you in touch with the team.
Okay. So one from Michelle Walsh, again for you, Andy. I think you're being blitzed. Are our communities organised in a way that they can respond to the increased demands for community involvement, and what, in your opinion, can be done to improve this capacity?
It's a good question. I mean, yes, in many ways. If you go in, I mean, I always take my own local village as an example. There are enough well qualified and enthusiastic people who are quite willing to get involved, especially as a lot of these committees involve voluntary time. But the kind of structures on the ground need to be set up and become a reality before people pitch in a way. So often it's having somebody to take the lead, and whether that is a role, I mean, it is a role for developers that are in a local area, but I think it's also a role for our local authorities and our local development companies to look at these projects, look at what we're doing and support those communities to be able to take part, because I just think the value lost by not having that engagement is far higher and a huge risk to communities. So there is a kind of cart before the horse, and the horse needs to be the leaders in this area. So whether it's the developers or the local authorities or development organizations, they need to kind of drive this.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Do you mind if I jump in there, Harry?
You, Alice, yeah, please.
I think like there's loads of different organizations doing loads of different pieces really well. So far, some of them have been kind of not separated from, as in like the climate and sustainability stuff has been seen as sort of separate from other bits and bobs. So there's a joining the dots exercise that I think would make a huge difference. So like not just individual schools, but working with education centres that know their whole community of schools. Things like the GAA Green Clubs. So if you're supporting a GAA club, it can be with a specific sustainability direction. Like somebody mentioned in the chat there, the public participation networks, also stuff like the Antarctic Climate Ambassadors. Like if we could link all of these initiatives, instead of people kind of working not against each other, but sort of in little silos, we would make much more significant progress. And I guess often in communities, you'll find the same 3 or 4 or 5 people are very active in many, many things. So if you could harness those people as climate ambassadors and raise their awareness, you know, of the different initiatives that are happening, then we could make significant progress towards a much better engagement.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, your comment around the GA, there is a GA club in every single village, townland in the country. So, you know, that
I mean, if you overlap that map of every school, primary school in the country, every GA club in the country, I mean, there's not many spaces that are left in between.
And I mean, as well, Andy, just struck by the level of funding that will come and flow through, or could flow through, if there's people there to receive it and structures there to disseminate it. 750 million over the life cycle. I mean, that needs to be started to be communicated today, with the level of infrastructural build out and transmission system and everything that needs to happen. So maybe, you know, getting that message out there for a start is really important. Look, yeah, we've gone 5 minutes over. I think we've managed to get through any of the questions, Alice and Andy, unless you have anything else you want to add before I close.
No, thanks very much for taking the time. And yeah, any questions that anyone has, they're welcome to send them on. Happy to talk to people offline.
Super.
Yeah, okay. Same here. Anyone wants to join us for this school year, get in quick. We'll be closing off the entries to that by the 1st of April, but we're happy to plan ahead for September as well. And yeah, plenty of inspirational people out there. So join us.
Super, thanks, Alice. So look, I'll just wrap up, folks. Again, just express my thanks to our speakers, Andy Fox and Alice Darcy, for their insight and answers today. As ever, thanks to Cork City Council and Cork County Council for their continuing support via their economic development funds. And thanks to you all for tuning in and engaging with the discussion today. If you have any feedback on this event or would like to discuss speaking at a future briefing, do not hesitate to contact us. A recording of this event will be available at energycork.ie shortly, and we will be back shortly with more briefings. Make sure you're on our mailing list or following us on Twitter and LinkedIn to hear about future events. And as ever, we're always open to and interested in recruiting new members to Energy Cork, so get in touch to learn more about that as well. Thanks all. Take care.
Sorry.